Alright, the game is Warfare. This is a little metagaming micro game, and I just played it with my wife. I've played this a number of times. One of the problems is, for a game that I think is kind of this cool, it's gotten very few plays by me, mainly because it has almost no solitaire playability. Well, it has no solitaire playability, which is why I'm doing a quick hit on it, of course. I've actually tried, but it's impossible. It's basically like playing Rochambeau against yourself. All right, very briefly, what you have is this situation where you have these, this map, and there's two sides. One person has these three home planets, one person has these three. Now, for a long time, I completely misplayed this game, and I'm really absolutely not sure if there's anything, if the game is as interesting as I hope it is, because I don't know if I've ever played it by the rules until today. But the victory conditions are, you get one victory point for each of your enemy's home planets that you sit on at the beginning of one of your turns. Okay. It can still not be a fast game under those conditions. But the way I used to play it was, you have to hold all three of his planets, and the rules are not absolutely clear about this. There's a reason why I misplayed it that way, but it is impossible. So you had to sit on all three of the enemy's planets at the beginning of your turn, which, if you're there and he doesn't have any ships, that's easy, but we'll see why. Okay. At the start of the game, well, you have nothing. You have the board, and you have a little sheet of paper, and you start off at the beginning of the first turn with 20 bucks, and you're allowed to buy ships with your 20 bucks. This is for the advanced game. There are simpler versions of the game where you don't get production and such not, and you still build ships in it. Okay. Your sequence of play is going to be, first you count your victory points. If you're, you get one victory point for each enemy base star that your ships occupy now at the beginning of your turn. If this brings your point total to the level necessary for the victory conditions of the scenario, then you win. And that point total is 3. So I'm assuming it's a running total the way it's worded. But that's not how I used to play it, because I used to say, well, that's lame, and then just got it stuck in my head that you need all 3, and that ends up being an unfinishable game, which you'll see why. Then you're allowed to build ships, and basically you have a number of different components to your ship that you build: beam, weapons, missiles, etc. We'll go into some detail of that. Most of them cost you 1 point to build. The one exception is a warp generator, which allows you to move on the board. That costs you 5 points to build. Then you're allowed to move, and movement is going to be one of the things that your ship can build as power drive. If you have a warp generator and power drive, you can move a number of hexes equal to your power drive rating. Or, if you prefer, and this is almost always the case, you can take these shortcuts along the line. So, for, say, let's say I have, I don't know, 8 movement points is what I had on my last ship, I think. Nah, I had like 14, but 8 was what I needed. Coming from here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You have to stop if you hit a planet or a star, or whatever you want to call them, with an enemy ship in it. And that's where the game should get kind of interesting, but usually it doesn't. Usually most players that I've been with just strike out and hit the enemy right away, because you can do that. You can pretty much swing your ships right into their home areas without any real problem. I kind of wish movement were slower. Maybe if the warp lines weren't here and you had to actually move from planet to planet, it would actually be a more interesting game in that sense, but then the planets wouldn't serve any real purpose, at least the intermediate ones. You could also make up all kind of production rules, you know, in some kind of campaign game for this, and it is calling to that. The problem is, once you do that, you've got Starfire, basically, that you're starting to get to. This is basically a progenitor to Starfire. Starfire is a very interesting game, which allows you to build ships in a similar sort of way, but this one has its own little weird elegance. Plus, I don't know if I own the actual Starfire. I have Starfire 2. Then you're going to resolve combat in spaces with a planet or star in which both players have ships. Combat's kind of a weird thing. Like I said, it's kind of like Rochambeau, except it's much more complicated. Then at the end of your combat and movement, you're allowed to pick up and drop off system ships kind of for free in a reorganization phase. You can drop them off as you're moving. They cost you a movement point to do so, or pick them up for each one. And you can also pick up and drop them off in combat, and that has to be done within the combat sequence, and that entails some risk potentially. Then you go to the end of the turn, you go to the next player's turn. Okay. For the different scenarios, the learning scenario, you start with 40 points of stuff. You'll not get any more in the rest of the game. You use only one base star, the middle one. And you want to occupy the enemy's base star at the beginning of your own turn. You don't worry about repair, resupply technology, and system ships. This can end up as a draw if neither player has the ability to move. It could happen right at the beginning of the game, actually. The basic scenario is each player starts with 50 build points and gets no more afterwards. And you don't play with repair, resupply, or technology. You have to use them all and build warp ships and or system ships at the start of your first turn. You only use the single base star hex at the middle of the at your end of the map. And you have to get 2 victory points to win. Well, clearly if you read that, you understand that victory points mean holding it over a turn, because you couldn't get 2 victory points at once under those circumstances. And the third game uses all the rules, all 3 of these base planets, and you have to get 3 victory points over a period of time. During shipbuilding, you're going to build a ship out of, like I said, a number of different attributes. One of the attributes is the power drive. This is important because it powers your movement, but it also powers all your other ship systems. If you're used to either Starfire or SFB, this concept comes very easily to your mind. But this is coming out about the same time as SFB and well before Starfire, so it was kind of a little of a new idea at the time. A warp generator, this is what's going to allow you to use your power drive to move on the map. Costs 5 points to build. Beam weapons. Okay, beam weapons are what you're going to use to shoot the enemy with. Pretty simple there. They cost 1 point each, and they're going to cost a point of power each during combat to charge up. Screens, likewise, cost 1 point each to build and cost a point of power each to charge up during combat. And so when you get to when you build a ship, you're going to have values here written down. So I have a warp generator, 14 power, 5 beams, 6 shields. And if I had taken any damage, I would mark that off, because damage is sort of temporary in the advanced game by just, let's see. Let's say I took a couple power drive hits, I would mark that off like this. Okay. So what screens are going to do is they're going to prevent damage that hits your ship. And each point of screens prevents a point of damage from hitting you. Okay, but screens and beams don't work well with the third type of weapon system, which is missiles. You cannot fire beams nor use screens if you're launching missiles in the same turn. And you can't have screens up if you're launching a systems ship during a turn. So you kind of have to design your ships on one track or another. It's either a beam and screen ship, or maybe a missile-armed ship, probably without any screens on it, or the third choice is some kind of warp-generated ship that's carrying system ships into battle, and then the system ships themselves will have one of the attack options, either the beams or missiles. Okay. Third thing you can buy, or next thing you can buy, is tubes, probably fourth hack or fifth. Each tube costs you 1 point of money to build, and each tube is going to cost 1 point to power up to fire missiles out of. Missiles themselves cost you 1 point for every 3 missiles you get, and when you take damage, most things are 1 for 1. So like here, I took 2 power drive hits, I mark that off. Well, if you take hits on missiles, you kill 3 missiles with each hit. Or if you have less than 3 missiles total, the rest of your missiles, as long as you have one. Missiles don't require power in and of themselves, but you have to power up the tubes that you fire. You can only fire a number of missiles equal to the number of tubes you have. And missiles work, they're the wild card in combat. They're going to change the nature of things. They're the way that the guy who's losing can win a battle, essentially. You can build cheaper ships that use missiles and they can be more effective. They could also fail miserably if you do things wrong. System ship racks cost 1 point each. What a system ship rack does is it allows you to put a ship without a warp generator on board a ship with a warp generator. All right, so that you're able to jump with fighters essentially, or big system ships and traveler type technology along with you. There is some difficulty in detaching them. It costs you 1 movement point to attach or detach each system ship during your movement phase. And remember, that comes off your power drive during movement alone. Or during combat, in order to detach them, you need to be without shields up, without screens in place. You can have them on board your ship, you just can't have them powered up. Okay, and then they give examples of how to build a ship. In the advanced scenario, each turn, after each turn is recorded, every set of 4 turns, every set of 4 turns is a tech level. So the first 4 turns are at tech level 0, the next 4 turns, 5 through 8, are tech level 1, next one at tech level 2. What tech level does is it adds a point to any damage your beams or screens do when they hit, or missiles. If missiles hit, well, it adds a point to what the shields will defend against. It adds a point to what beams or missiles do when they hit. Repair and resupply. So when you build a ship, though, it's fixed. It will always be what you built. It'll always be the same tech level, and it'll always have the same equipment. You could get it damaged, and then you're allowed to repair it for the same cost it would be to build those parts that you're repairing, but you can't build it bigger than it was. It can only build up to what it was and exactly what it was. You could, of course, leave it partially unrepaired if you saw that as an advantage. You can also resupply missiles. They cost the same as they were to building. You can't add more missiles to a ship after it's already been designed. Combat is weird in this game. So let me go over the status of what you write down in your orders for combat. You're going to write down an order of a tactic from the combat result table, and that's one of these 3: attack, dodge, or retreat. And they all seem pretty obvious to what they're doing, but maybe they're not. Like sometimes if you're retreating, you may be able to get a hit that you wouldn't be able to get. Well, you would be able to get it with attack, but you may be able to get it without getting hit back. You may get some advantages by taking some of these tactics. And that's kind of an interesting factor here that you have to keep in mind. So you have 3 tactics: rock, paper, and scissors, right? You indicate where your beam weapons are firing, if you have any. You indicate each missile that you're firing, and you need a tube for each one, and you write down a drive setting for that missile. That can be any number you like, between 0 and infinity, essentially. Although the higher it is, the less there is a point to it. Then you allocate power from your power drive. The power is allocated to a number of different things: beams, screens, ship's drive, and tubes for the missiles. And you can't exceed your current power drive. However much engine you have left after damage, you can't exceed that. Now, most of those I've already kind of explained. You allocate it to beams, it's going to be the amount of damage you do with your beams. You allocate it to shields, it's the amount of damage that your shields absorb without actually hurting your ship at all. You allocate it to tubes, it's the number of missiles you can fire. The last one is thrusts. Anything you allocate to thrust is going to generate the drive difference between an attacking and a defending item. Now I say item because for the most part that's ships, but missiles also have a drive rating. And remember, you get to set that at any value you like. That's important because a differential of speed of drives is what's going to determine whether or not you hit. All right. And then you also list any system ships that you're dropping off or picking up. Now, when you drop off a system ship, remember you've got to have no shielding up. When you fire a missile, you got to have no shields and fire no beams. When you drop off a system ship, I think actually you have to take dodge or retreat activity as well. When you drop off a system ship, the system ship is invulnerable. Nobody can target it because it doesn't exist yet. And if they blow up your mothership, it doesn't actually affect the system ship. If you're picking up a system ship and you get blown up with the mothership during that turn, you don't succeed in picking it up. However, the enemy can still shoot at the system ship during that phase. All right. Now the comparison is really interesting here. So what you do is you have this thing, and this is a simple beam ship. I've allocated 5 beam weapons, 6 shields, and 3 thrust. The 3 thrust, I may have had more points. No, that actually, I had only 14 points total for that ship. Basically, what you're doing with the beam weapon is you're trying to match your attack rating so that you get a hit value based on what you think the other person's going to do as their tactic and their drive speed. So, you know, if they're going speed 0 and attacking me and I've got a thrust of 3, I'd be on the +3. And since they're going with the attack, I'd miss them. But if they were dodging, I'd hit them. Okay. On the other hand, if I was going slower relatively, I would have hit them and maybe done additional damage. Of course, they probably would hit me too. Missiles are compared in the same way. They always attack, and the thing with missiles is you have to try to guess what your enemy's speed is. And if you guess it correctly, you'll be going the same speed with your missile, and you'll hit them and do additional damage. Shields subtract off all the damage that you take in the turn, but it's the cumulative damage you take in the turn. So for example, if I have shield 6 and you hit me with missiles do 2 points each, I think, base. You hit me with 3 missiles at base value. Well, my shield stops all of those. But if you hit me with 4 missiles at base value at 2 points each, you've done 8 points of damage. So 2 actual points have to be marked, and that would be like I did here, marking them off. I can choose which are the weapon systems or whatever is on my ship. The only thing I can't choose is the warp generator. And that is really about it. Let me look at the system ship rules here during combat. Oh, there is one more rule in combat. Okay, so if you do a retreat, you could get an escapes result, in which case you back out of the hex into an adjacent space. If 3 rounds of combat go without anybody hitting anybody else, the attacker in that combat, and that could be the original owner of the planet. So like if I'm sitting here and you come down and attack me, you're the attacker here, has to retreat. So it's up to the attacker to make sure that the combat causes some damage to someone. And that's all there is to that. Now, let me just do this really quickly. Hi. What do I think of this thing? So, every time that I've played it, that I can remember, I've always walked away with this thought of, okay, my God, it's kind of cool, but I can never get the edge on the other person because I was playing the victory conditions wrong. It seems like it'll go on forever. There's just no way to get the other person down. That's incorrect. So it ends up kind of being a guessing game even in the broadest sense of it, which is to say, you know, as the first player, I come up with sort of my strategy that I'm going to take. So what I did on the game with my wife was I didn't build anything on my first turn. Because I figure, all right, I'm down here. If I don't build anything, I have 20 points to begin with. I'll have 10 more points next turn. Now, I could have built something, but you're not allowed to go grab the home planet, a home planet of the other player on the very first turn. And it would be unfair if you were, because then I would automatically be able to do that without any chance of her putting any defense up. That would really suck in anything other than the advanced game in that case. So anyway, I collected my $30. She did the same thing in past, so then I built a $30 ship, ran up here. Now I've got a location on her star. Now her choice is build 30 points and attack me, and if she succeeds, now we're kind of even, except she's driven me off and I'm maybe not in the best of positions. So I'm kind of doing this, try to out-psych what she's going to do there. But alternatively, there's a lot of advantage to playing defensively. So if she had attacked me first on that first turn and swung down with her 20 points of ships, then I have 30 points to immediately knock her out of there. And you've got to be holding a planet at the beginning of your turn. So there's definitely an advantage to going first in it. Of course, she doesn't like going first in games, so she retracted. She gave me that option instead. Basically, what I'm not sure of is, how much that advantage works down to, because so much of the game comes to psyching the other person out, psyching them out with what you build. You could build something and send it across the map to attack them, and they think it's your entire point value. And the reality is you're holding points off, and you force them to build something powerful. You spend a few of your points at a low-tech level to send an expedition off to their home planet, and then when the game, when they build their low-tech ships, then you have a bigger pool of money to go into higher-tech ships, or you can build a bigger ship than they built. The size of a ship, the amount of, at least if you're going with beams and shields, the size of the ship is really important. With missiles, it's less important, although you still have to pay this sort of premium on the ability to move a ship. So if you build a warp-generated ship, you kind of feel like you have to build something good into it, at least, or make it a system ship carrier, where all the goodies are locked, are what it's going to be carrying into combat, and then it hopes to avoid combat using, dodges or retreats to get out of the area. It can retreat a hex and leave a bunch of system ships behind to just kind of feed on enemy warp ships that are less efficient in terms of their expenditure. The problem with it all, it's a little too simplistic, which, is kind of the charm of it. I don't think I'd want to expand this too much, though. I wanted to at first, and then I found out about Starfire and said, Starfire is what this is expanded. So this becomes kind of this weird little puzzle game that's really, really clever, and I still like it. I just, it doesn't fit more than as that neat little clever puzzle game. Definitely it was worth whatever I don't know what these things went for, $3, $5, something like that. I bought this one actually used, I think. It's got this weird little smiley face on it. Well, not used, but it wasn't one of my earliest games. I'd become, quite used to SFB by the time I picked this up. I think I picked it up at a con or something, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I got it early. Who knows? I don't know what that smiley face is from, though, if it wasn't a used game. Anyway, I haven't gotten my playings out of it, so I don't know enough about it to be sure that to say, this ends up being a worthless little puzzle once you figure it out. I don't think it is. I think the level of guesswork means that it's always going to be kind of interesting. It's just, it may kind of boil down to, okay, if he's holding his money and if he outguesses me and throws paper when I throw rock, I've just lost. Not just in the combat, where that definitely is happening. Picking your speeds and everything is really this big game of rock, paper, scissors. But also, even in the pure strategy of the game, it may come out to that. I don't think what it comes out to is something where one strategy will beat any other. I think that it comes down to there's sort of a cycle of different things you can do, and one beats another, and the other beats that one. But it's cute because of that, Anyway, that's that. Up it goes.